This is a $20,000 comedy movie. This is a $500 million one. And we're gonna break down comedies at every budget in between. I've spent the last 6 years obsessing over comedy movies, and I've even made 2 feature-length comedies myself. By the end of this, you'll know whether spending more money actually makes a comedy movie better, or if it completely spoils what made them work in the first place. With the average Hollywood budget coming in at $65 million, the idea of making a comedy for under $1 million sounds impossible. Yet you've almost certainly seen, or at least heard of Clerks, which was made for $27,000, Swingers made for $250,000, and Napoleon Dynamite for $400,000. Everything about these movies is stacked against them. They're often self-funded, like in the case of Clerks. The cast often gets paid very little, like Napoleon Dynamite star John Heater, who only got paid $1,000 total, which is less than Hollywood stars make in a day. There's also no studio backing at all, which means the movies are shot in real houses, real stores, and real locations instead of studio lots. And to make things even worse, you're severely limited on time. Napoleon Dynamite was filmed in 22 days, Clerks 21, Swingers 18, and I personally shot my feature films in 10 and 8 days, while Hollywood films get between 30 and 120 days. By every traditional metric, these films sound destined to fail. Yet you know them for a reason. Clerks grossed $4.4 million at the box office, over 150 times its budget, and became the cult classic that birthed Kevin Smith. Swingers pulled in $4.6 million and jump-started the careers of Jon Favreau, Ron Livingston, and Vince Vaughn. But Napoleon Dynamite took it the furthest, grossing $46 million. Because even if these are homemade films, the passion, story, and relatability matter much more than the overall polish. They still have funny scenes.
Do you sell videotapes?
Yeah, what are you looking for?
Happy Scrappy Hero Pop?
1 second. I'm on the phone with the distribution house now. Let me make sure they got it. I'd like to place an order. All volume 8. I need your Oh, wait a minute. What was that called again?
Lines that are still being quoted today.
Baby, you are so money and you don't even know it.
And memorabilia that you can still see worn in public today. So how do they stack up when you compare them to higher budgeted comedies? Let's look at Swingers side by side with the highest grossing comedy of the same year, The Nutty Professor. It had 216 times the budget of Swingers, but does it look 216 times better? What about even twice as good? Or do they essentially just look the same? With the right willpower, even a micro-budget comedy can stand toe-to-toe with big-budget comedies. So what actually changes when you upgrade from the under $1 million budget range to the $1 to $10 million budget range? You're still living in the indie space with movies like Super Troopers, My Big Fat Greek Wedding, and Waiting, because studios just don't make comedies in this budget range. And I know you might be thinking about movies like Animal House or Caddyshack, but when you account for inflation, these movies push past $10 million. I might be biased, but I'm highly confident that each of these movies could have been made on micro budgets. The biggest differences have nothing to do with what you actually see on screen, but instead what's happening behind the scenes. Let's compare the credits for Clerks versus Super Troopers. Notice not only how Super Troopers has a much larger crew, but also several departments that didn't even exist on Clerks. And look, I had a bigger crew on my second feature compared to my first. It definitely made the actual filming easier, but from the audience's perspective, nothing actually improves. There's also no meaningful upgrade in the casts, and in a lot of cases, I'd actually take the micro-budget performances. The comedy can definitely still be solid.
You take them out, you pay for everything, you never make a move.
And then you go home, alone, to masturbate while you cry, using your own tears as lubricant.
Okay, that was once, and I was drunk, and it was Valentine's Day.
But I'd argue it's on par with the micro-budgets. Now let's compare Swingers to My Big Fat Greek Wedding. Without context, no one would be able to tell you which cost $250,000 and which cost $5 million. So is there a clear upgrade between micro-budget comedies and low-budget comedies? I'm gonna go with no. But that's all about to change, because the $10 million to $80 million range is where things really start to flip. Because the budgets are finally big enough to solve problems, but not so big as to create new ones. If you're a big comedy movie fan like me, then no doubt, almost all, if not all of your favorite comedies exist within this budget range. They include Superbad, The Hangover, Wedding Crashers, American Pie, and you know what? I'm just gonna start flashing collages of mid-budget comedy movie posters because there were so many. Yes, Literally all of these are mid-budget comedies. So how are these films elevated from the low and micro-budget comedies? For one, you can now cast A-list actors like Adam Sandler, Will Ferrell, and Paul Rudd. Though you can't stack up too many together because that alone can change it from a mid-budget to a big budget. You could also fill the supporting cast with established, recognizable actors. But probably the single most underrated aspect of this tier is that you can get writers and directors who are in the primes of their careers, such as Todd Phillips or Judd Apatow. And you have a studio to back you, which means you get producers who are veterans in the industry, essentially unlimited days on set, and access to additional writing teams to elevate the scripts. Like Hangover writers Scott Moore and John Lucas, who did an uncredited rewrite of Wedding Crashers, or Old School and Road Trip writer Scott Armstrong, who did an uncredited rewrite of Bad Santa. And you're kidding yourself if you think you have that kind of access on a low or micro budget comedy, because you couldn't even afford these guys to write the original script. This is really what gave us the great comedies that we sorely miss. So what happens when you push past $100 million? In many cases, these are just mid-budget comedies that cast one too many stars. Four Christmases casting Vince Vaughn, Reese Witherspoon, and Robert Duvall, or Grown Ups casting Adam Sandler, Chris Rock, Kevin James, David Spade, and Rob Schneider are the perfect examples of this. After inflation, both of these crossed the $100 million line, yet they could have easily both been made on mid-budgets. Hell, as an indie movie producer, I'd argue they easily could have been done on low budgets. But then you have the spectacle-driven comedies like The Other Guys and Tropic Thunder. These two have massive casts, but they also merge genres, and the spectacle inflates the budget. And that brings us to the most extreme example. The $500 million comedy, or $533.7 million comedy to be exact. Deadpool and Wolverine. How the hell does a comedy, or even any movie for that matter, get to a budget this big? Well, with Ryan Reynolds reportedly getting paid $50 million, Hugh Jackman likely getting a similar salary, a never-ending run of ultra-expensive cameos, insane CGI and VFX demands, and getting production halted due to the SAG-AFTRA strikes, I guess you end up with a budget of $500 million. Was it worth it? Well, it grossed $1.3 billion. But when you take into account that theaters take roughly half of the revenue from movie ticket sales, it only made a modest profit. Overall, it generated less of a net profit than several mid-budget comedies like The Hangover, Ted, and Scary Movie. Don't get me wrong, Deadpool and Wolverine was the funniest movie I've seen in theaters post-COVID.
There are 206 bones in the human body. 207 if I'm watching Gossip Girl.
And I definitely enjoyed the other big budget comedies I mentioned, but none of them cracked my top 10 or even top 20. So this begs the question, is bigger always better? Well, I think the answer is ultimately up to you. When you think of Vince Vaughn, do you prefer his big budget Four Christmases? Or his mid-budget work in Wedding Crashers, Dodgeball, and Old School? Or even his micro-budget Swingers performance? For Adam Sandler, is it the big budget Grown Ups? Or is it Happy Gilmore, Mr. Deeds, and Billy Madison? And for Ben Stiller, are you in on the big budget spectacle Tropic Thunder? Or would you go with Zoolander, Meet the Parents, or There's Something About Mary? For me, it's mid-budget all day. But I'd love to hear what you think. If you noticed, almost all of these mid-budget comedies came out during the 2000s. It's no accident, as there was so much going on secretly behind the scenes to make these comedy movies as great as they were. And I let you in on what those secrets were here.